The Miami International Airport terminal was noisy. Passengers hurried through the terminal lobby with their luggage. Gate C-14, designated for Prestige Air Flight PA-428 to New York, JFK, was crowded with passengers eager to board the plane. Among them was the Thompson family, blending in with the crowd. 45-year-old Marcus Thompson wore a plain white shirt and dark jeans. His appearance gave no indication that he was worth $3.7 billion, or that he owned the airline they were about to board. Beside him, his wife Stephanie looked equally modest in her elegant cream-colored blouse and tailored pants. Stephanie was 42 years old. The couple also had a son. Tyler was 16 and stood between them, playing with his phone. He was wearing an old hooded sweatshirt from Georgetown, his dream school. To any observer, they were just an ordinary family returning home from a vacation in Miami. Sometimes the richest people prefer to look ordinary. But the real question is, could you recognize them? Or would your eyes remain fixed only on appearances? 6 months earlier, Marcus had quietly acquired Prestige Air through a series of shell companies and carefully structured deals. The aviation industry press reported the acquisition as private equity firm buys struggling regional airline, but they missed the real story. Marcus Thompson, founder of Thompson Global Logistics, had also entered the aviation industry. Boarding will begin shortly, the gate attendant announced over the intercom. We will start with our first-class passengers and passengers requiring assistance. Marcus took out his phone and discreetly opened an encrypted app that tracked the company's operations in real time. Flight PA-428 was proceeding as planned. The crew had checked in, and the aircraft, a Boeing 787 he had personally approved for the fleet renewal, was mechanically sound. But today it wasn't mechanical soundness that concerned him. Stephanie caught his attention and gave him a meaningful look. She was the only one who knew about these inspections, and she had learned to read Marcus's pre-flight rituals. "Ready for a new adventure?" she asked quietly, a hint of amusement in her voice. Marcus smiled. "Let's see what we learn today," he murmured. "Do you think Marcus's inspection is correct?" Tyler looked up from his phone. "Dad, did you check if this plane's Wi-Fi is good? I need to finish my college essay," he asked. "It should be," said Marcus. "We upgraded the connection systems last month," he added. Tyler's eyebrows rose slightly. His father had said we instead of they when talking about the airline. It was a clue that Marcus sometimes forgot to suppress when he was with his family. Small words reveal big secrets. We or they. Sometimes a father doesn't tell even his own son everything. But the truth, sooner or later it comes out. The gate attendant's voice crackled over the intercom again. "Boarding is now open for Prestige Air Flight PA-428 to New York. First-class passengers and Diamond Elite members, please come forward," he finished his announcement. Marcus gathered his luggage and motioned for Stephanie and Tyler to follow him. They approached the podium with their boarding passes ready. The gate attendant, a young man named Kevin, scanned their tickets with his usual efficiency. His eyes lingered briefly on the first-class seats, then returned to his screen. "Thompson family, welcome aboard. You are in row 1, seats A, B, and C. Have a good flight," he concluded. There was no hesitation. There were no surprises, just professional courtesy. So far, everything was going according to plan. They crossed the jet bridge, Tyler walking between his parents. "I still can't believe we're flying first class," Tyler said quietly. Stephanie chuckled softly. "Your dad likes to thoroughly experience his products," she replied. Tyler looked at Marcus curiously and asked, "My products?" "The industry," Marcus corrected gently. "Understanding what different airlines offer helps me make better logistics decisions for my company," he said. They boarded the plane, and Marcus immediately began his quiet assessment. The cabin was spotless. The ambient lighting was warm and inviting. The leather seats in first class showed very little wear. A flight attendant stood by the galley, her uniform spotless and her smile professional. Her name tag read Grace Chen. "Welcome aboard," Grace said warmly, checking their boarding passes. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, your seats are 1A and 1B. Your son is in seat 1C, across the aisle. Can I help you with your bags?" she asked. "We're fine, thank you," Stephanie said with a smile. As Marcus stowed the carry-on bags in the overhead compartment, he noticed another flight attendant emerging from the forward galley. She was older than Grace, perhaps in her late 30s, with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her name tag read Rachel Winters, Chief Flight Attendant. Rachel scanned the Thompsons with the practiced efficiency of someone who evaluates passengers. He had seen that look before. On his first inspection, a gate agent had accidentally flagged his ticket for additional screening. That look, it says more than 1,000 words. Surprise, suspicion, and that underlying feeling, you don't belong here. Have you ever been on the receiving end of that look? Marcus sat in seat 1A by the window. Stephanie sat in seat 1B next to him, and Tyler sat in seat 1C across the narrow aisle. "This is nice," said Tyler, examining the seat controls. "Much better than economy class." "Enjoy it," said Marcus. "But remember, comfort is a privilege, not a right. Wherever you sit, be respectful to the crew," he said. Tyler took off his headphones and replied, "I always do, Dad." Rachel Winters approached their row with a professional smile. "Good afternoon, welcome aboard Prestige Air. May I see your boarding passes again?" she asked. Marcus silently handed her all 3 tickets as Rachel examined the tickets, watching his face. Rachel said in a careful voice, "First class." "Well, when were they purchased?" she asked. Stephanie said pleasantly, 3 weeks ago. She also asked, "Is there a problem?" Rachel quickly replied, "Oh, no problem at all. We're just doing a routine check. We've had some problems with ticket fraud recently," she answered. Actually, there was no such problem. She was just making it up. Marcus kept his expression neutral. There was no widespread ticket fraud problem. If there had been such a security issue, he would have been informed. This was a personal judgment under the guise of protocol. Rachel, returning the boarding passes, said, "Everything looks fine." But instead of leaving, she lingered. "I should point out that there are certain service standards in first class. We ask that passengers maintain appropriate behavior and appearance throughout the flight," she said. Rachel moved away to greet other passengers, leaving Marcus to digest what had just happened. As the cabin filled, Marcus watched the other first-class passengers being greeted. A middle-aged white couple in designer sportswear, a warm welcome, no ID check. An elderly Asian couple, a polite greeting, no extra scrutiny. Only the Thompsons were subjected to the routine verification. Grace Chen appeared with a tray of pre-flight beverages. "May I offer you mineral water, orange juice, or coffee?" she asked. "Water would be great, thank you," said Stephanie. "Me too," Marcus added. "And orange juice for our son, please." As Grace served them, she asked with a sincere smile, "Your son seems very focused. Is he applying to college?" Tyler took out one of his earbuds. "Actually, it's SAT prep. I'm trying to raise my score," he replied politely. "Georgetown?" asked Grace, noticing his hoodie. Tyler's face lit up. "That's my dream. Political science," Grace said warmly. "That's wonderful. My little brother just graduated from there. It's a great program." The interaction was natural and human, everything that had been missing in the previous conversation with Rachel. Marcus appreciated Grace's sincere professionalism and mentally marked her as someone who should be promoted when the time came. The last passengers boarded the plane and the main cabin door closed. The captain's voice came over the intercom. According to Marcus's briefing notes, his name was Robert Palmer. He was a solid pilot with 20 years of experience. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Palmer. The weather is clear all the way to New York, and the flight time is approximately 2 hours and 40 minutes. Sit back, relax, and we'll get you to JFK right on time," he concluded his announcement. As the plane taxied away from the gate, Rachel walked down the aisle one last time, checking the overhead bins and making sure the seatbelts were fastened. She stopped at the first row. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice authoritative, "I need you to come with me to the galley for a moment. There's an urgent matter regarding your reservation that needs to be addressed." Stephanie's eyes widened. "What situation?" "You just confirmed our tickets," she replied sharply. Rachel said, "This is a matter that needs to be handled privately," she added. "It will only take a minute." In fact, everyone was certain there would be further discrimination here. Marcus could feel the eyes of the other first-class passengers turning toward them. He slowly stood up, his movements calm and measured. "Of course," he said. "Let's get this over with quickly," he continued. Calmness is sometimes the most powerful weapon, but the storm was just beginning. The galley was cramped and functional, a stark contrast to the luxurious first-class cabin just a few steps away. Marcus stood calmly, his hands clasped in front of him, waiting for Rachel to explain the situation. Rachel took out her tablet. "Mr. Thompson, I've reviewed the passenger list, and it appears there's an inconsistency with your reservation," she said. Marcus asked, "What kind of discrepancy?" "The system shows that your tickets were purchased using a corporate discount code," Rachel said. "However, for first-class seats purchased at corporate rates, the business purpose must be verified." "I don't see that document in your file," she said, actually looking for a detail that would embarrass Marcus and his family. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "No documentation is required in advance for corporate discount codes. They are verified through the company account at the time of purchase. If there had been a problem, it would have been flagged then, not now," he replied. He knew this because he had personally reviewed Prestige Air's ticket policies at the time of purchase. Rachel was making up protocol on the spot. Sometimes people make up rules, but what if the person you're dealing with is the one who wrote those rules? Rachel's jaw tightened. "Still, I need to see proof of your business connection, perhaps a company ID or authorization letter," she continued. "I'm traveling with my family," Marcus said calmly. "This is a personal trip, not a business trip. I only use the corporate account to book all my flights. It's easier for accounting." "Then you'll need to provide additional verification," Rachel insisted. "First class is a premium service, and we need to be sure," she continued. But Marcus cut her off. "What do we need to be sure of?" Marcus was trying to remain extremely calm. Then he asked a few questions. "That I can afford the seat I paid for, or that I meet other criteria you haven't specified?" Rachel's face flushed. "I'm just following company policy," she replied. "Company policy? Marcus repeated. He took out his phone. Would it be okay if I confirmed this policy with your supervisor? He continued. The captain is my superior on this flight, Rachel said. And he's preparing for takeoff. If you don't want to delay this flight for all the passengers, I suggest we resolve this issue now. Grace finally spoke hesitantly. Rachel, the tickets are valid. The system approved them weeks ago, she said. Grace, that's none of your concern, Rachel snapped. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Thompson, I'm giving you two options. Either provide the documents I requested, or I'll seat your family in empty seats in the main cabin until we resolve this issue after landing. This was unbelievable. Rachel was actually treating her boss badly. Do you think Rachel will be able to resolve this issue? That's the moment power stands before you and you make a choice, submit or leave. But what if there's a third way? What if you never give up? Marcus studied Rachel's face, prolonging the silence for a moment. He saw something he had seen many times before. Someone looking at a black family seated in first class and seeing an anomaly that needed to be corrected. Marcus said slowly, "Let me get this straight. You are threatening to remove my family from seats we purchased and paid for, based on a policy and verification requirements that are not part of your company's actual procedures. Is that correct?" he asked. "I'm not threatening anyone," Rachel said. "I'm enforcing protocol to maintain the integrity of our first-class service." Marcus could have ended this right now if he wanted to. One call to CEO David Hartley would have been enough. Rachel would have been removed from this flight before the door closed. One message to the legal team would have been enough. The airline would have apologized publicly by dinner time, but that wasn't the point of the inspections. He needed to see how deep the problem ran. "Fine," Marcus said. "We'll move to the main cabin, but I want this documented. I want you to explain in writing why you removed a family with valid tickets from their assigned seats, including your name, employee ID number, and their names." Rachel blinked, clearly not expecting compliance. "That won't be necessary," she said. Marcus was firm. "It absolutely is necessary," he said. "If I'm being removed from first class, I want a document explaining why. Isn't that company protocol?" Rachel's uncertainty surfaced for the first time. "I can provide a report after the flight," she replied. "Now," Marcus said, "before you move my family, I'll wait here while you document your reason." Grace stepped forward. "Rachel, maybe we should reconsider," she said. Rachel said sharply, "Grace, I said this doesn't concern you." She looked at Marcus, her confidence shaken. "Mr. Thompson, you're being unreasonable. I'm trying to resolve this quietly," she said. "Removing a family from first class is not a quiet affair," said Marcus, "especially when that family has done nothing wrong. Sometimes to win, you first have to bend, then you watch them fall into their own trap. That's chess." At that moment, the cockpit door opened and Captain Robert Palmer appeared. He was a man in his 50s, with graying temples, the relaxed demeanor of someone who had flown thousands of hours, and a respectable appearance. Looking at Rachel and Marcus, Palmer asked, "Is everything okay here? We're about to take off." Rachel straightened up and spoke in a professional tone. "Captain, I was explaining to Mr. Thompson that there was a verification issue with his first-class reservation. I suggested moving his family to the main cabin until we can resolve the issue in New York," she said. Her goal was to get the captain on her side. Palmer frowned. He looked at Marcus, then back at Rachel. "What kind of verification issue?" he asked. Rachel replied, "The documents required for corporate tickets." Palmer took out his own tablet and began tapping at the screens. "Corporate tickets are verified when purchased. If the system accepted the payment, the tickets are valid." He looked at Rachel. "What am I missing?" he asked once more. Rachel hesitated, not expecting the captain to challenge her. "Just that. Under these circumstances, I think we need to be extra careful," she replied. "What circumstances?" Palmer asked. The question hung in the air. Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing she had fallen into her own trap. Any answer she gave would reveal her true thoughts. Rachel finally said, "I was being meticulous." Palmer looked at Marcus, an apologetic expression on his face. "Sir, I apologize for the confusion. If your tickets are valid, and they appear to be on my screen, then you and your family should definitely remain in your assigned seats. Is there anything else I need to clarify?" he asked politely. Marcus nodded. "No, Captain. Thank you for addressing this directly," he replied. Palmer nodded, then turned to Rachel. "Miss Winters, we need to talk after this flight. Get Mr. Thompson back to his seat, and prepare the cabin for takeoff," he said. As Palmer returned to the cockpit, Marcus followed Rachel back to first class. Rachel walked around the cabin completing her pre-flight duties, but her movements were stiff, her smile forced. Grace, on the other hand, approached the Thompsons with genuine concern. "This should never have happened. I'm so sorry," Grace said. Stephanie said, "It's not your fault." As the plane taxied down the runway, Marcus took out his phone and opened his notes app. He began writing everything down. Rachel's initial inspection, the policy requirements she made up, her attempt to remove them from first class, her inability to provide a legitimate reason when questioned by the captain. This wasn't just about Rachel. It was about a culture and a system that allowed, even encouraged, such behavior. Tyler leaned in from the hallway. "Dad, what was this really about?" he asked. Marcus looked at his intelligent 16-year-old son who was applying to elite universities and would encounter countless such moments throughout his life. Marcus said quietly, "It was about someone making assumptions based on our appearance. He saw us sitting in the first-class section and decided we didn't belong here." "Because we're black," said Tyler. It wasn't a question. "Because we're black," Marcus confirmed. Tyler was silent for a moment. "Does this happen often?" he asked again. "More often than it should," Stephanie said. "What are you going to do about it?" Tyler asked. Marcus smiled slightly. "Watch and learn, son. Watch and learn," he repeated. The plane took off smoothly and climbed into Florida's clear sky. Once the plane reached cruising altitude, Rachel began her first-class service, her demeanor distinctly measured. When she came to the Thompson family, she avoided eye contact. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked. "Water, please," Marcus said politely. "And orange juice for my son." Rachel shook her head sharply and walked away. Grace returned a few minutes later with drinks, warm towels, and a sincere smile. "Would you like a snack service as well? Hot nuts, a cheese plate, or fresh fruit?" she asked. "Fruit sounds good," said Stephanie. While Grace was preparing the service, Marcus noticed Rachel standing in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, whispering urgently. He couldn't hear the conversation, but her body language suggested she was asking someone for help. Fine, Marcus thought. Let her worry. He took out his own phone and wrote a message to CEO David Hartley. "David, I'm on another observation flight on the JFK flight, PA428. We need to schedule a meeting after landing. There are cultural issues that need urgent attention. I'll prepare a full report." He didn't sign the message with his last name. Hartley was one of the few people aware of the inspections, but even he didn't know Marcus's full travel schedule. The reply came quickly. "Understood. I'll be in the executive lounge when the plane lands." The situation seems serious. Marcus replied, "It is. This is no longer about individual mistakes. We have systemic problems." "Dad," said Tyler, "can I ask you something?" Marcus replied, "Of course. That flight attendant Rachel is going to get in trouble, isn't she?" he asked. Marcus nodded. "Probably," he replied. "Do you think she's a bad person?" he asked again. It was a thoughtful question, one that showed why Tyler would be a good political science student. Marcus thought about it carefully and said, "I don't think she's bad, but I do think she's acting on assumptions she never questions," he added. Tyler asked again, "So what will happen to him?" "That depends on whether he's willing to learn," Marcus said. "People can change, Tyler, but they have to want to." Tyler slowly shook his head, trying to process this. Then he asked, "Is that why you document everything? To help him learn?" Marcus smiled. "Partly. But also so it doesn't happen to the next family, or the one after that," he replied. The flight proceeded smoothly. Rachel kept her distance, while Grace provided attentive service. Marcus observed everything and took mental notes. As they descended into New York, Marcus's phone vibrated with another message from Hartley. "I've arranged a private conference room at the terminal. We can talk immediately after we land. I should also mention that we received a complaint. Your flight's chief flight attendant called ahead to report a difficult passenger situation." "I assume that was you?" he asked. Marcus wrote with a wry smile. "Yes, it was me. We'll talk after we land." He showed the message to Stephanie, who shook her head. "She complained about you. After everything that happened?" she asked, shocked. "To protect herself," Marcus said. "A classic defense mechanism, making the victim the source of the problem." Stephanie asked, "She doesn't know what she's getting into, does she?" Marcus's expression was calm, but there was a steely glint in his eyes. "No, he really doesn't," he said. When the plane landed at JFK, Marcus gathered his belongings. The other first-class passengers also stood up and began collecting their things. The Thompsons waited patiently in their seats. Rachel made one final announcement. "On behalf of Prestige Air, thank you for flying with us today. We hope you enjoy your time in New York," she concluded. Her voice was steady and professional. She probably thought the worst was over. She couldn't have been more wrong. The jetway at JFK was crowded with passengers trying to escape the confines of the plane. Marcus, Stephanie, and Tyler moved with the flow, but instead of heading to baggage claim, Marcus directed them to a secret door marked crew and authorized personnel only. Tyler looked confused. "Dad, where are we going?" he asked. "To the meeting," said Marcus, swiping the key card he pulled from his wallet. The door opened. Stephanie noticed the card. "When did you get a crew access card?" she asked. "I've always had it," Marcus replied, adding, "I just don't usually use it." They walked down a quiet corridor, away from the chaos of the passenger terminal. Tyler was piecing things together, the look on his face slowly shifting from bewilderment to realization. "Dad," Tyler said slowly, "how did you get a crew access card?" Before Marcus could answer, they reached a door labeled Executive Conference Room B. Marcus knocked twice and entered. "What do you think will happen next? Will Rachel get the punishment she deserves?" The room was sleek and modern, with a large conference table in the center. Seated at the head of the table was David Hartley, CEO of Prestige Air. When the Thompsons entered, Hartley immediately stood up. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson," he said, shaking their hands. Then he noticed Tyler. "And this must be your son, Tyler, right?" he asked politely. "Yes, sir," said Tyler. Hartley gestured to the chairs. "Please sit down. I've ordered coffee and water. This won't take long, but I wanted to address the situation immediately," he said. As they settled into their seats, Marcus turned to Tyler. "Son, there's something I haven't told you about this airline," he said, about to reveal the truth. Tyler glanced between his father and the CEO and asked, You own it." "Majority shareholder," Marcus confirmed. "I bought Prestige Air 6 months ago. We kept it quiet while the restructuring work was underway," he replied. Tyler's eyes widened. "So all this flying?" he stammered. "It was a test," Marcus finished. "I do this periodically. I experience our service as a normal customer to see how the company really operates." "What about today?" Tyler asked. Marcus said firmly, "Today, problems arose that we need to fix." Hartley cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson, I received a very disturbing call from your flight's chief flight attendant, Rachel Winters. She filed a formal complaint alleging that you were hostile, refused to comply with safety procedures, and threatened to initiate legal proceedings when asked routine safety questions," he said. Stephanie was shocked, her mouth agape. "This has nothing to do with what happened," she replied. "That's what I thought," Hartley said. "That's why I obtained the cabin voice recordings and reviewed the incident before this meeting." He turned his laptop to show a paused video image. "We have cameras in the kitchens and certain cabin areas. For privacy reasons, there are no cameras in passenger seats, but it's enough to record crew interactions," he said. Hartley pressed play. The footage showed Marcus and Rachel in the galley, their conversation clearly recorded. They watched Rachel's increasingly accusatory tone, her fabricated policy requirements, her inability to express legitimate concerns when under pressure. It was unbelievable. Everything was right there in plain sight. Then came Captain Palmer's intervention, his professional handling of the situation, and Rachel's deflection of the issue. When the video ended, Hartley leaned back heavily. "Mr. Thompson, I'm very sorry. This is unforgivable," he said, supporting their case. "It's not just unforgivable," Marcus said. "It's a pattern. This is my 3rd inspection flight in 6 months. Each time, I've been subjected to some kind of profiling or suspicious treatment," he continued. "David, I bought this airline because I saw its potential. Good routes, good equipment, a solid customer base. But I'm learning we have a serious culture problem." "I agree," Hartley said quietly. "There have been incidents before. Complaints about bias were mostly dismissed as misunderstandings. But this," he pointed to his laptop, "this is documented proof that we're disappointing our passengers." Stephanie leaned forward. "It's not just a matter of documentation. It's about the assumption that we don't belong here." Tyler, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "Mr. Hartley, what about the flight attendant, Rachel?" he asked. Hartley looked at the young man respectfully. "That's a fair question. What do you think should happen?" Tyler thought carefully. "I think she should face the consequences. But at the same time, I also think she probably just thought she was doing her job. Maybe she needs to understand why what she did was wrong," he replied wisely. Hartley nodded. "You're right on both counts. Rachel will be suspended pending a full investigation. Depending on the results of the investigation, she could be fired. But you're also right that this is more than just a punishment," he said. He turned to Marcus. "What would you like to see happen?" he asked. Marcus had been thinking about this since Miami. "I want our policies reviewed by an outside consultant who specializes in equality and inclusivity. I want a confidential reporting system where passengers can submit discrimination complaints directly to an independent review board, not just to management who can dismiss them," he replied clearly. "Long term?" Hartley asked. "I want Prestige Air to be the industry standard for inclusive service," Marcus said. "I want active diversity hiring at every level, from ground crew to management, and I want regular audits." Hartley was taking notes quickly. "That's very comprehensive." "It has to be," Marcus said. "Half measures won't work. Either we commit to real change, or we continue to be the kind of airline that kicks black families out of first class." There was a knock at the door, and Hartley said, "Come in." A young woman in a Prestige Air uniform entered, Grace Chen, a flight attendant on his flights. She looked nervous but determined. "Mr. Hartley, I apologize for disturbing you, but I heard you're investigating the incident on PA 428. I was there, and I think I need to tell you what I saw," she said. "Do you think Grace was genuinely a good person, or was she someone trying to get promoted?" Hartley pointed to an empty chair. "Please sit down. These gentlemen are Mr. Thompson and his family. Feel free to talk." Grace's eyes widened slightly when she recognized them. Then she understood. You're the owners?" she asked. Marcus gently corrected her. "Majority shareholders." "I remember you, Grace. You were very kind to my family today," he continued. Grace sat down, her hands clenched tightly together. "I want to say that what Rachel did was wrong. I've worked with her for 2 years, and I've seen her treat passengers differently based on their appearance. It always bothered me, but I didn't know how to speak up without jeopardizing my job." "You're speaking up now," said Stephanie. "Because I can't stay silent anymore," said Grace. "This could have been my family. My family immigrated from Taiwan with nothing. They worked for minimum wage so my brother and I could have better opportunities. Last year when they finally went on vacation, their first real vacation, they saved up for months and flew first class. And I kept thinking, what if someone treated them the way Rachel treated you?" Grace showed incredible empathy. "If you were in Grace's place, would you really defend her like that? Or would you just go on with your life?" Marcus leaned forward. "Grace, do you think Rachel's behavior is an isolated incident, or is it part of a broader pattern?" he asked. Grace hesitated, then said, "There's a culture among some senior flight attendants. They talk about maintaining standards and preserving the privilege of first class. They use code words, but everyone knows what they mean. Not all of them. Most of us just want to do our jobs well. But there is definitely a group that believes first class should be a certain way," Hartley asked in a tense voice. "And management? Management has always been on the side of the senior crew," said Grace. When the full extent of the problem became clear, the room fell silent. Marcus finally spoke. "Grace, thank you for being honest. I know that took courage. I want you to know that you won't face retaliation for speaking up. In fact, I want to include you in developing our new training program. We need people like you, who see the problems and want to solve them," he said, honoring Grace. Grace looked shocked. "Really?" she asked. "Really," Marcus confirmed. "We're going to build a better airline, and we need good people to make it happen," he said. After Grace left, promising to document what she had seen, Hartley turned to Marcus. "What about Rachel? Do you want to be involved in the disciplinary decision?" he asked. Marcus shook his head. "No. I want this matter handled through the proper channels and with the proper documentation. I don't want special treatment because I own the company. Follow standard procedures, but make sure those procedures are fair and thorough," he replied. "Understood," Hartley said. "However, I must warn you, Rachel will likely object. She has been with the company for 12 years, is a union representative, and will likely claim she was only following procedure," Marcus said firmly. "Then the procedure needs to change. And if she objects, we will have video evidence, witness statements, and documentation of the footage. We will prevail." Tyler, who had been listening carefully, asked, "Dad, are you going to tell people you own the airline now?" Marcus thought about it. "Eventually. But not yet. I want to do a few more audits, see how deep these problems go. Also, people will treat me differently when they find out I'm the owner," he replied. "That's smart," said Stephanie. "But it's also exhausting. How many more times do you want to put us in this situation?" she asked. Marcus reached out and held her hand. "I'm sorry I got you and Tyler involved in this. I could have flown solo," he replied. "No," said Stephanie. "We're a family. We live through this together, and we fix it together," she said, giving Marcus her full support. Sometimes the strongest weapon is not being alone. Hartley stood up and extended his hand to Marcus. "I'll give you a full action plan within 48 hours. Mandatory training will begin in 2 weeks. What about Mr. Thompson? Thank you for taking the time to conduct these inspections. Most business owners don't do that," he said. "Most business owners," said Marcus, "don't fly economy or first class on their own airlines. They use private jets and never see the problems." As the Thompson family prepared to leave, Hartley added, "There's one more thing. Rachel doesn't know who you are yet. When should we tell her?" he asked. Marcus smiled slightly. "Don't tell her. Let the investigation continue as if I were an ordinary passenger. If she finds out I'm the owner, she'll claim she's being targeted. It's better to let this proceed objectively," he replied. "You're absolutely right," said Hartley. "But she'll figure it out eventually." "Eventually," Marcus agreed. "By then the changes will already have begun," he concluded. "We'll see if Rachel gets the punishment she deserves at the end of the investigation, or if she learns a lesson from what she's been through." They exited the private corridor and returned to the main terminal. Tyler walked quietly between his parents, unusually silent. Finally, he said, "Dad, I have one more question." "Ask," Marcus replied. "When you started your company, did people treat you the way Rachel treated us today?" Marcus nodded. "All the time. Banks wouldn't give me loans because they didn't think a black kid from Detroit could build a logistics empire. Potential customers didn't want to meet with me because they thought I was an assistant, not the owner. Once a receptionist told me to use the service entrance," he replied at length. Tyler asked again, "How did you deal with that?" "I proved them all wrong," Marcus said. "I built a business so successful they couldn't ignore it, and now I'm using that success to pave the way for others." Tyler took this in. "That's why you're fixing the airline. Not just for us, but for everyone who comes after us," he said. "Exactly," Marcus said. As they collected their luggage and headed toward the car service, neither noticed Rachel Winters standing by the crew exit, phone pressed to her ear, speaking urgently with a union representative. She had no idea that her entire conversation was being monitored by Prestige Air's security team on the CEO's orders. She had no idea that the difficult passenger she was complaining about owned the airline she worked for. And she had no idea that her 12-year career was hanging by a thread, but she was about to find out. 3 days after the Miami flight, Rachel Winters sat in a plane conference room at Prestige Air's JFK Operations Center. The room was deliberately designed to be impersonal. White walls, fluorescent lights, a single table with uncomfortable chairs. It was a room designed for difficult conversations. Across from her sat Human Resources Director Margaret Reynolds and Union Representative James Okafor, whom Rachel had frantically called. Between them lay the manila folder containing the evidence against Rachel. "Miss Winters," Margaret began, in a professionally neutral tone, "thank you for coming today. As you know, we are conducting an official investigation into the incident that occurred on flight PA428 from Miami to New York on Saturday." Rachel nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had spent the last 3 days rehearsing her defense, trying to convince herself she had done nothing wrong. "I understand, and I want to make it clear that I followed proper security protocols throughout that flight." Margaret opened the folder and pulled out several printed documents. "Let's review what happened. First, you approached the Thompson family, Marcus Thompson, his wife Stephanie, and their 16-year-old son Tyler, and asked to check their boarding passes. Is that correct?" "Yes," said Rachel. "We had received warnings about ticket fraud and I was conducting routine checks." Margaret looked at her notes. "I spoke with our security team. There were no fraud warnings for that flight or any other flights that week. Where did you get that information?" Rachel's confidence faltered slightly. I thought I saw something in the morning briefing." "The morning briefing is documented," Margaret said, sliding a printed email across the table. "Here's what was discussed. No fraud alert, no unusual security concerns, nothing requiring additional passenger verification. Sometimes defenses are paper thin, a document, an email, and the whole story unravels. Only the truth remains." Rachel looked at the document, her mind racing. "Then maybe I was overly cautious. Is that such a bad thing?" Union Representative James leaned forward. "Margaret, my client's security concern, even if misguided, does not constitute misconduct." "I agree," said Margaret, "but it wasn't just about security. After Mrs. Winters confirmed that Captain Palmer Thompson's family's tickets were valid and told you to send them back to their seats, what did you do?" "I did my job and prepared the cabin for takeoff. And after the plane landed, you filed a formal complaint alleging that Mr. Thompson was hostile and threatening. Is that correct?" "He was argumentative," Rachel insisted. "He refused to comply with standard procedures." Margaret pulled out another document, a transcript. "This is an audio recording of the conversation in the galley. Let me read part of it. Mr. Thompson said, and I quote, 'Let me get this straight. You are threatening to remove my family from the seats we purchased and paid for, based on a policy you cannot quote and verification requirements that are not part of your company's actual procedures. Does that sound hostile to you?" Rachel's face flushed. "He was challenging my authority. He was asking legitimate questions," Margaret corrected. "Questions you couldn't answer because the policy you mentioned doesn't exist." James interjected again. "Margaret, if there's a communication issue about company policy, that's a training issue, not grounds for termination." "You're right," Margaret said. "That's why we also looked into Miss Winters' history with the company. Over the past 3 years, we've received 7 informal complaints from passengers about her behavior. None were thoroughly investigated at the time, but they all have a common theme." She spread several documents across the table, passenger complaint forms, each telling a similar story. A Latin businessman had questioned his first-class ticket. An elderly black couple had been forced to provide additional identification. A young Asian woman had been told she didn't look like someone who flies business class. 1 mistake, 2 mistakes, 7 mistakes. This is no longer coincidence. This is a pattern, and patterns reveal the truth. Rachel's stomach knotted as she looked at the papers. They were all misunderstandings, different situations. "Were they?" Margaret asked. "Because I see a pattern here, Miss Winters. After reviewing the video footage from Saturday's flight, yes, we have cameras in the kitchen. I'm concerned that what happened to the Thompsons is not an isolated example of poor judgment. It was consistent with a long history of profiling passengers." "I didn't profile anyone," Rachel protested, raising her voice. "I was enforcing first-class service standards." "What standards?" Margaret pressed. "Please explain to me which standard the Thompson family violated." Rachel opened her mouth, then closed it. She couldn't say what she was thinking, that they didn't look like first-class passengers. Their casual clothes and demeanor seemed out of place among the business travelers and wealthy retirees who typically occupied those seats, because saying it out loud would confirm exactly what Margaret was accusing her of. "I made a decision," Rachel finally said, her voice weak. "Maybe it was the wrong one, but I was trying to do my job." James placed his hand on Rachel's arm, a warning to stop talking. Margaret, what does Prestige Air recommend here? Margaret closed the file. Given the seriousness of the incident, the video evidence, and the patterns of behavior documented in these complaints, we are terminating Miss Winter's employment immediately. She will receive 2 weeks severance pay, but her access to all Prestige Air facilities is revoked effective immediately. Rachel felt the ground slip away beneath her. You can't do this. I've worked for this company for 12 years. 12 years, Margaret confirmed, during which time you repeatedly violated our core values of respect and inclusivity. Miss Winters, Prestige Air serves passengers of all backgrounds. We cannot employ someone who makes passengers feel unwelcome because of their appearance. 12 years, a career, an identity, all gone in an instant, and all that remains is, but I was just doing my job, right? James pulled out his briefcase and switched to lawyer mode. We will file a complaint through the union. We have grounds to argue that this is an excessive termination and that Miss Winters was not adequately trained on diversity protocols. Do whatever you need to do, Margaret said calmly. But the decision stands. Miss Winters, security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. Your final paycheck will be mailed within 10 business days. As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared at the door. Rachel stood on shaky legs, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. This isn't fair, she whispered. I was just doing what I thought was right. Margaret's expression softened slightly. Miss Winters, I know you thought so, but what matters more than your intentions is the effect it had. You made a family feel unwanted and humiliated on their flight. You made them question whether they had the right to sit in the seats they paid for. Regardless of your intentions, that is unacceptable. As security escorted Rachel away, James gathered his papers. Margaret, you know this isn't over. The union will fight this. I know, said Margaret, but between us, James, we have video, audio recordings, documented complaints, and a passenger ready to testify. It's as clear-cut a case as you can get for this type of lawsuit. James paused at the door. Is there something you're not telling me? Is there a reason this incident is being taken so seriously? Margaret's expression remained neutral. Every incident must be taken seriously. We're finally doing what we should have done years ago. After James left, Margaret sat alone in the conference room for a while, then took out her phone and dialed a number. Mr. Hartley? The process is complete. Rachel Winters has been fired. David Hartley's voice was gloomy on the other end of the line. How did she take it? As you'd expect, defensive, insisting she did nothing wrong. The union will probably file a complaint. Let them, Hartley said. We have the documents to win any arbitration. But Margaret, I don't want this to be just a punishment. When the new bias awareness program is developed, enroll her in it, make it voluntary, but clearly state that her participation could be positively evaluated if she wants to be rehired. Margaret took note. Do you think she deserves a second chance? I think everyone deserves the opportunity to learn and grow, Hartley said. Whether she takes it is up to her. Meanwhile, Rachel, in her small apartment in Queens, still in her uniform, was looking at her termination letter. Her phone kept ringing, concerned messages from coworkers who had heard the news, none of them seeming particularly surprised. A message from Grace Chen caught her attention. I'm sorry you're going through this. But Rachel, you needed to hear that what you did was wrong. I hope you take the time to really think about it. Rachel deleted the message without replying. She wasn't ready to think about it. She wasn't ready to examine her actions or question her assumptions. Not yet. 4 weeks later, Marcus Thompson stood in a conference room at Prestige Air headquarters, in front of 300 employees from the New York hub flight attendants, gate agents, customer service representatives, and ground crew. The mandatory bias awareness training, ordered by him, was led by Dr. Patricia Williams, a renowned expert on equality and inclusion in the workplace. Marcus had chosen not to reveal that he owned the company yet. Sitting in the back row, dressed casually, he watched as Dr. Williams began the session with a provocative question. How many of you have made assumptions about someone based on their appearance? Nearly everyone in the room, including Marcus, raised their hand. Good, said Dr. Williams. This is human nature. Our brains are pattern recognition machines, and we constantly make snap judgments. The real question isn't whether we make assumptions, but what we do with those assumptions. She moved to the next slide and showed a photo of a hooded black man standing in an airport. Quick assessment. What do you think about this person? Don't overthink it, just give your gut reaction. Marcus heard murmurs around him. Broke, a budget traveler, probably flying economy class. One person whispered, security risk? Now, said Dr. Williams, what if I told you this man is a brain surgeon returning home from a medical conference? What if he's a tech company CEO who prefers comfortable clothes? What if he's a veteran returning from visiting his family? The room became uncomfortable. The point is, Dr. Williams continued, our assumptions tell us more about our biases than about reality. And in customer service, those biases have consequences. He moved to the next slide, a case study. Marcus recognized it immediately. The names had been changed, but this was his flight. Let me tell you about a real incident that occurred on a Prestige Air flight a month ago. As Dr. Williams recounted the case, Marcus observed the reactions around him. Some employees looked uncomfortable, others defensive. A few nodded in agreement, clearly having heard about this incident through the grapevine. When Dr. Williams finished his presentation, he asked, "What should the flight attendant have done differently?" A young gate agent raised his hand. He should have trusted the system. If the tickets were valid, they were valid. Period. Exactly, said Dr. Williams. What else should he have done? A flight attendant spoke up. First, he should have examined why he was suspicious. Was it really about the tickets, or was it about the person holding the tickets? That's a very important question, Dr. Williams agreed. The first step in changing prejudiced behavior is self-awareness. During lunch break, Marcus stepped outside for some air. He found Grace Chen by the coffee machine holding a cup with both hands. "How's the training going?" Marcus asked. Grace flinched slightly, then recognized him. "Mr. Thompson, I didn't know you were here." "Just observing," Marcus said. "And please call me Marcus." Grace smiled nervously. "It's intense. Some people are really resisting. I heard someone in the bathroom call it forced wake-up politics." Marcus nodded. "Change is always uncomfortable, but uncomfortable doesn't mean wrong. Can I ask you something?" Grace said. "Why are you here? I mean, you own the place. You could have made this training mandatory and moved on." "Because if I'm going to ask my employees to do this," Marcus said, "then I need to do it too. I need to examine my own biases." Grace looked impressed. "This is really different from most managers I've met." "Maybe that's the problem," Marcus said gently. "True leaders don't give orders from the back row. They walk at the front. They take the same training. They feel the same pain. And they say, 'I'm learning too.'" That afternoon, Dr. Williams introduced role-playing scenarios. Employees formed pairs to address situations where their assumptions could lead them astray. Marcus was paired with Helen, an experienced flight attendant who had been with Prestige Air for 20 years. In the scenario, Helen played the role of a gate agent who had to inform a passenger that their upgrade request had been denied. Marcus played the passenger. Helen delivered the message professionally, but Marcus noticed a subtle detail in her body language, a slight tension, a slight step backward, as if preparing for a confrontation. When the role play ended, Dr. Williams asked, "Helen, what did you feel during this interaction?" Helen hesitated. I expected resistance, maybe aggression." "Why?" Helen looked at Marcus, then away. Because I assumed he would be upset about being demoted." "Well, why did you expect aggression, rather than just disappointment?" Dr. Williams pressed. There was a heavy silence. Finally, Helen said quietly, "Because he's a big black man, and I've learned, not formally, but through my experiences, the media, and all the messages we receive, that I need to be careful around big black men." This honesty was painful, but important. "Thank you for your honesty," said Dr. Williams. "That's our job, to recognize these patterns, understand where they come from, and consciously choose different responses." At the end of the day, as the employees filed out, most looking exhausted from the emotional toll of confronting their biases, Marcus pulled David Hartley aside. "How many more sessions are planned?" "An 8-week introductory training," Hartley said. "Then refresher training every 3 months. We also conduct scenario-based training in our flight simulator. In these sessions, the crew learns how to handle various passengers with different needs and backgrounds." "Good," said Marcus. "So what about the Independent Review Board for Discrimination Complaints?" "It will be operational next week. We hired 3 external consultants, all experienced in civil rights and aviation, to serve on this board. Any complaints will be forwarded directly to them, bypassing internal management." Marcus nodded in approval. "What about the revised policies?" Hartley handed him a thick document. "They've been completely overhauled. Clear definitions of the difference between legitimate security concerns and profiling. An explicit ban on requesting additional verification based on appearance. Mandatory documentation requirements for removing any passenger from a flight, and strict penalties for violations." Marcus flipped through the pages. It was comprehensive, just as he had hoped. "David, I know this is difficult. You had to confront some uncomfortable truths about the company culture." Hartley sighed. "You were right, Marcus. We had issues we weren't addressing. I'm sorry it took your experience and that of others to force us to confront them. Now the question," Marcus said, "is whether these changes will be permanent. Policies are only as good as their implementation. That's why I want you to publicly declare your ownership," Hartley said. "Show people this isn't just corporate lip service. The owner himself experienced discrimination and is personally committed to fixing it." Marcus thought about it. He had planned a few more ghost flights, but maybe Hartley was right. Maybe visible leadership was more important right now. "Give me another month," Marcus said. "I want to see how the training impacts our service. Let me do one more undercover flight and we'll see if there's really been a change." "Another month," Hartley agreed. "But Marcus, at some point you have to step out of the shadows. These employees need to see that their boss isn't testing them, but standing with them. That evening, Marcus sat in his home office in Manhattan, reviewing the day's training feedback. Tyler knocked on the door and entered, carrying his laptop. "Dad, got a minute?" "Always. What's up?" Tyler sat down and opened his computer. "I'm writing my college essay. You know, the meaningful experience one. I want to write about what happened on that flight." Marcus put down his papers. "Tell me what you're thinking." "I want to write about learning that prejudice isn't always obvious. Prejudice can just look like someone doing their job. And fighting it isn't about revenge. It's about fixing broken systems so fewer people get hurt." Marcus's throat tightened with emotion. This is really meaningful, Tyler. Can I write about what you've done? The education, the policy changes." "You can write," Marcus said, "but make sure the article is about your experiences and your growth, not my reaction. The admissions committees want to know who you are, not who your father is." Tyler smiled. "I'm way ahead of you. I'm focusing on how you changed my understanding of activism. It's not just protests and hashtags, but also boring things like policy reviews and education programs." "Those boring things," Marcus said, "show how real change happens." As Tyler left to continue writing, Stephanie appeared at the door. "How was the training session?" "Exhausting," Marcus admitted. "It's hard to watch people confront their own biases. Some really struggled with it." Stephanie sat down at the edge of his desk. "Do you think it will work? Can you eliminate people's biases?" "You can't eliminate biases," Marcus said. "But you can teach people to recognize their biases and choose different behaviors. Asking people to make better choices is the best we can do." "What about Rachel, the flight attendant?" Marcus had been thinking about Rachel a lot lately. She was offered the chance to participate in the training voluntarily. She refused, so she didn't learn anything, said Stephanie. "Not yet," Marcus corrected, "but people learn at different paces. Maybe she's not ready to examine her behavior, or maybe she needs to hit rock bottom first." "You sound like you're hoping she'll change." "I am," said Marcus, "because if she doesn't change, if she stays angry and defensive, then all of this, the firing, the training, the policy changes, won't actually improve anything. It will just create more division." Stephanie kissed him on the top of his head. "You're a good man, Marcus Thompson. Probably too good for the airline industry." Marcus laughed. "Well, the airline industry can't get rid of me now." As the month progressed, the training sessions spread to all prestige air hubs. Feedback was mixed. Some employees welcomed the changes enthusiastically, while others remained skeptical. But Marcus noticed subtle shifts. Gate agents double-checked their assumptions. Flight attendants were more mindful about equal service, and ground crew pushed back against profiling requests from security. The culture was changing. Slowly, sometimes painfully, but truly. And in a Queens apartment, Rachel Winters sat at the kitchen table reviewing job listings. Every airline application asked about previous layoffs. She would have to explain what happened in every interview. She couldn't escape it, and maybe she was beginning to realize she shouldn't try to escape. Maybe it was time to stop defending herself and start listening. If she wanted to, the path to salvation was there. But first, she had to admit she needed salvation, and that was the hardest step of any journey. 5 months after the incident on Flight PA-428, Marcus Thompson stood backstage at a press conference held at Prestige Air's Manhattan headquarters. Through the gap in the curtain, he could see the crowd of aviation journalists, industry analysts, employee representatives, and civil rights advocates who had been invited to watch the press announcement, mysteriously described as an important announcement regarding equality and inclusivity in aviation. David Hartley stood beside him, nervously adjusting his tie. "Are you sure you want to do this? Once it's made public, you'll lose the ability to conduct your beloved covert inspections." Marcus smiled slightly. "I think I've learned what I need to learn. Besides, the company needs visible leadership on this issue." Stephanie emerged from the side entrance, looking elegant in her charcoal suit. She had played a key role in developing the visual elements of today's presentation. With a designer's eye, she had ensured that every slide, every graph reinforced the message of inclusivity. "Tyler is third in line," she said, planting a kiss on Marcus's cheek. "He wants to see his father change the industry." "No pressure," Marcus said with a tense smile. A production assistant signaled they were ready. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped in front of the curtain. As he approached the podium, the room fell silent. He could see surprise on many faces. They were expecting David Hartley, or perhaps a famous spokesperson. Instead, they were met by a man most of them didn't recognize. "Good morning," Marcus began, his voice steady. "My name is Marcus Thompson. 5 months ago, I was a passenger on Prestige Air Flight PA-428 from Miami to New York. I was traveling with my wife Stephanie and our son Tyler. We had purchased first-class tickets, boarded the plane on time, and settled into our seats for what should have been a routine flight." He paused and made eye contact with the audience. What happened next was far from routine. A timeline of the day's events appeared on the screen behind him. Marcus recounted the events systematically. Rachel's initial inspection, her fabricated policy requirements, her attempts to remove his family from their seats, and finally Captain Palmer's intervention. Some of you may be wondering why I'm telling this story, Marcus continued. After all, unfortunately, these kinds of situations happen frequently. Colorful passengers are profiled, questioned, and removed from flights with disturbing regularity. What makes my story different? He moved to the next slide and the Prestige Air logo appeared. I'm different because 6 months before that flight, I purchased a majority stake in Prestige Air. The flight attendant trying to remove my family from first class? He worked for me. The airline company allowing the culture of bias to continue? That's me. And the responsibility to fix these problems? That's me too. The room suddenly came alive. Cameras flashed. Reporters frantically took notes. Analysts leaned forward in their seats. Marcus waited for the noise to subside. I could have handled this quietly. I could have fired the employee, made a private settlement, and moved on. Instead, I chose to use this incident as a catalyst for systematic change. Because the problem isn't just one flight attendant, it's a widespread culture across the industry that makes assumptions about who can travel in premium cabins, who can buy first-class tickets, and whose presence warrants extra scrutiny. Power brings responsibility. You own it, then you own the culture. Both the successes and the failures. He clicked through slides showing Prestige Air's comprehensive reforms, mandatory bias training for all employees, an independent review board for discrimination complaints, revised policies with clear outcomes, and a commitment to diversify hiring at all levels. These changes didn't come cheap, Marcus admitted. Training 3,000 employees is costly. Hiring outside consultants is costly. Implementing new reporting systems is costly. But do you know what's even more costly? Losing passengers who feel unwelcome, settling lawsuits filed by people who experience discrimination, and most importantly, perpetuating a culture that treats human dignity as a bargaining chip. He paused for a moment, carefully choosing his next words. Let me be clear, I don't think the flight attendant who profiled my family is a bad person. I think he was operating within a culture that never challenged his biases. A culture that allowed assumptions about race and class to be masked as maintaining standards. It's not just ours, but a culture that many airlines have failed to address. The screen switched to graphs showing data indicating a decrease in discrimination complaints, an increase in employee satisfaction scores, and an improvement in customer service scores across all demographic groups since the implementation of the new policies. These numbers show me we're moving in the right direction. But numbers aren't enough. Real change requires constant commitment, constant vigilance, and a willingness to have uncomfortable conversations. Marcus gestured to the audience. That's why I'm here today. I want others to see what's possible. I want passengers to know they can demand better treatment. And I want employees in this industry to understand that speaking up about bias isn't grounds for dismissal. Staying silent is. He moved to the last slide, which had a simple phrase: aviation for everyone. This isn't just a slogan. It's a commitment. Prestige Air serves passengers of every background, every income level, every race and ethnicity, and each one, whether in seat 1A or 42F, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. When Marcus finished his prepared speech, hands shot up in the room. He pointed to a reporter from Aviation Week. Mr. Thompson, what happened to the flight attendant involved in the incident? Rachel Winters was terminated following a thorough investigation, Marcus said. However, she was offered the opportunity to voluntarily participate in our bias awareness training program. As of last month, I'm pleased to say she accepted that offer. This surprised most of the audience. Marcus continued, Look, I don't believe in throwing people away. If someone is willing to make the hard effort to examine their biases and change their behavior, they deserve support. Ms. Winters has a long road ahead of her, but I respect her willingness to embark on that journey. Another reporter. Are you concerned about the reaction of passengers who see this not as a good business strategy, but as woke politics? Marcus smiled. I worry about running a profitable airline that treats people well. These two goals are not mutually exclusive. In fact, since implementing these changes, our revenue has increased by 12%. It turns out that when you welcome all your passengers, more people want to fly with you. A representative from the NAACP asked, Mr. Thompson, what message would you like to send to other business leaders, especially those in industries where discrimination is systemic? Marcus leaned into the microphone. You can't fix what you don't acknowledge. For too long, companies have treated discrimination complaints as public relations issues to be managed, not cultural problems to be solved. That has to change, and it starts with leaders being willing to honestly experience their own organizations, not through carefully curated tours and sanitized reports, but through the real experiences of real customers. After the press conference, Marcus was surrounded by people wanting to talk to him. Industry leaders impressed by his sincerity, advocates thanking him for using his platform, and journalists requesting follow-up interviews. Tyler pushed through the crowd, a look of pride shining on his face, and came up beside him. Dad, that was incredible. You're going to be all over the news tonight. For better or worse, Marcus said, stroking his son's hair. Stephanie had been stopped by a producer from 60 Minutes who wanted to do a special report. "I think you've changed the conversation about bias in American companies," she said. "Maybe," said Marcus. "Or maybe I just admitted publicly what everyone already knew." As they prepared to leave, David Hartley pulled Marcus aside. "There's someone here who wants to talk to you. He's been watching from the back. I think you should hear what he has to say." Marcus followed Hartley into a small conference room next to the main hall. Inside, Rachel Winters sat, looking tense and exhausted. She stood up when Marcus entered, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Mr. Thompson, I wasn't sure you'd agree to see me." "Sit down, Rachel," Marcus said gently, taking the chair opposite her. "What did you want to tell me?" Rachel took a shaky breath. "I want to apologize. Not the defensive apology I made at the dismissal hearing, but a real apology. What I did to you and your family was wrong. I judged you based on your race, assumed you weren't first class, and tried to humiliate you using my authority. I'm sorry." Marcus studied her carefully. The defensive anger he'd seen in the kitchen 5 months ago was gone, replaced by what seemed like genuine remorse. "What changed?" he asked. Rachel looked at her hands. "Losing my job was devastating. For weeks I was angry at you, at Prestige Air, at everyone I thought had betrayed me. I applied for jobs at other airlines, but they all asked about my dismissal. I had to explain what I did over and over, and each time I heard how it was perceived." She lifted her head and looked into his eyes. "Then I watched your press conference from the lobby. I heard you say I wasn't a bad person, just someone working in a broken culture. And I realized you showed me more courtesy than I ever showed you. Real change comes from pain, from loss, from shame. And suddenly, you don't recognize the person you see in the mirror. At that moment, you either break down or you rebuild." Marcus waited, letting her continue. "I accepted the training offer. Not because I think I can get my job back, I know that won't happen, but because I need to understand what I did. Dr. Williams made me see that throughout my entire career I equated premium service with privilege, as if first class had to be a certain way, serve certain people, and anyone who didn't fit that image somehow belittled it." Rachel's voice trembled slightly. "I looked at your family and saw a threat to that image. I never thought of you as people, as a father trying to get home with his family, as passengers paying for their seats and deserving respect. I just saw the difference and responded with suspicion and hostility." "That's an important realization," Marcus said quietly. "I've been working with Dr. Williams for 2 months," Rachel continued. "I'm processing my biases, understanding where they come from, learning different ways to respond. Eventually, he suggested I could become a trainer myself, someone who could explain to other airline employees what happens when you let biases guide your decisions." "How do you feel about that?" Marcus asked. Rachel smiled sadly. Who wants to be known as the person who discriminates against their boss? But at the same time, maybe it could be useful. If my mistake can help prevent others from making the same mistake, maybe it has meaning. Marcus leaned forward. "Rachel, I'm glad you're doing this. I really am, but you need to understand one thing. Redemption isn't about regaining your reputation or getting back what you lost. It's about becoming someone who doesn't cause that kind of harm anymore." "I know," Rachel said. "Dr. Williams was very clear about that. It's not about me feeling better. It's about making sure another family doesn't feel the way your family did." They talked for another 20 minutes. Rachel's journey, her plans to complete the training program, and her eventual hope to work in diversity consulting in the aviation industry. Marcus listened more than he spoke, assessing whether this transformation was real or just a role. Finally, Rachel stood up to leave. "Mr. Thompson, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that you changed my life. Not by destroying him as I initially thought, but by making me face the parts of myself I had ignored." Marcus stood up too. "Rachel, I hope this journey leads you to a meaningful place. But remember, the real test isn't what you said in this room, but what you do every day from now on." "I understand," said Rachel. She extended her hand. Marcus shook it, a sign of acceptance if not forgiveness. Some wounds take longer to heal. After Rachel left, Stephanie entered the room. "How did it go?" "It's hard to say," Marcus admitted. "She seems sincere, but words are easy. Lasting change is hard." "You gave him a chance," said Stephanie. "How he chooses to use it is up to him." That evening, Marcus's announcement dominated aviation news and spilled over into mainstream media. CNN aired a segment titled, "Billionaire on a Secret Mission in His Own Airline." Forbes published an article titled, "Why This CEO's Approach to Discrimination Could Transform Corporate America." Social media was abuzz with discussions about bias, privilege, and accountability. Tyler watched the news from the family living room and occasionally pointed out comments he found particularly interesting to his parents. "Dad, you're trending on Twitter. #aviation for everyone. That's what matters," Marcus said. "Not me, but the discussion. If it causes even one airline to review its policies, It's worth it. In the months that followed, the ripple effect continued. 3 major airlines announced similar bias training programs. The Federal Aviation Administration began investigating discrimination complaints in the industry. Congress held hearings on equality in aviation. And Prestige Air, while not perfect, became an unexpected leader in inclusive service, truly putting in the effort. As employees gained the power to challenge discriminatory behavior, employee turnover decreased. Customer satisfaction scores rose across all demographic groups. The airline, which had been struggling when Marcus bought it, was now profitable and growing. 6 months after the press conference, Marcus conducted one last secret audit. His last before ownership became too widespread and true anonymity disappeared. This time he flew alone, taking a routine economy flight from Chicago to Atlanta. The flight attendants were professional and warm. When a white passenger tried to take the overhead luggage bin that a black passenger had clearly reached first, a crew member intervened politely but firmly. "Sir, this passenger got here first. There's space 3 rows back." No one questioned Marcus's ticket. No one checked his ID. No one made assumptions about whether he belonged here. Marcus thought this was exactly how flying should always be: boring, uneventful, and egalitarian. Sometimes the greatest success is when nothing happens. A boring flight, a smooth journey, a moment when no one is questioned. That is real change. As the plane landed in Atlanta, Marcus got a text from Tyler. "How did the final inspection go?" he asked. Marcus replied, "Boring." "Meaning it was perfect," he answered. Tyler's reply, "Does that mean you're done testing the airline and can be my dad again?" he asked again. Marcus smiled. "I've always been your father, but yes, I think Prestige Air has passed the secret inspections. It's time to trust the culture we've built," he replied. "What if it breaks?" he insisted again. Marcus replied, "Then we fix it again. That's what ownership is, a constant commitment to do better." A year after the event that started it all, Marcus received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "Thank you for changing someone." Inside was a message from Grace Chen. "Mr. Thompson, I wanted to let you know that I have been promoted to the position of Chief Flight Attendant, Rachel Winter's former position. I promise to use this authority differently than he did. I also wanted to share that I worked with Rachel in the training program. She has come a long way, and I know you will never trust her again, but I wanted you to know that your decision to forgive rather than punish truly changed someone's life. Not just hers, but mine too. You showed me that it's important to speak up, even if it's scary. Thank you," Minter Grace wrote. Marcus forwarded the message to Stephanie. Stephanie replied immediately, "Change is fragile, but it gives me hope," she wrote. That evening, Marcus sat in his home office reviewing the quarterly reports. Prestige Air's numbers were strong, revenue was up, complaints were down, employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. The reforms he implemented were not only ethical, they were also profitable. Tyler knocked on the door and entered with a large envelope. "Dad, my early decision letter from Georgetown arrived," he said. Marcus's heart raced. "And," Tyler smiled, "I got in. Full academic scholarship." Marcus stood up and hugged his son tightly. "I'm proud of you." "The essay about flying, did they mention that?" he asked. The admissions officer said it was the most honest and insightful essay they'd read about understanding systemic bias, Tyler said. He said I showed real maturity by recognizing that activism isn't always dramatic, but sometimes involves policy changes, education programs, and boring board meetings. "He's right," Marcus said. "Real change happens in the boring stuff." Tyler looked at him seriously for a moment. "Dad, thank you for showing me that. Not just being rich, but using what you have to make things better. I want to be that kind of person too," he said. Marcus felt his eyes well up with unexpected emotion. "You already are that kind of person, Tyler. You always have been," he replied. As they celebrated Tyler's acceptance, Stephanie appeared with sparkling apple cider, the family tradition for good news. They toasted to Georgetown, to their efforts being rewarded, and to a future that looked brighter than the past. Later, as Marcus prepared for bed, he stood at his window and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there, hundreds of Prestige airplanes were in the air, carrying thousands of passengers. Some were in first class, some in economy. Some were white, some black, some every color and origin in between. And ideally, he knew reality was more complicated than ideals. They were all treated with equal respect. It wasn't perfect. There would be more incidents, more complaints, more work to be done. Cultural change wasn't a destination. It was an ongoing journey. But it was worth the journey. Because 5 months ago, a flight attendant had looked at Marcus and his family and seen people who didn't belong here. Today, thanks to the hard work of many people, Grace's courage, Hartley's loyalty, Rachel's difficult transformation, and thousands of employees who honestly confronted their own biases, Prestige Air was becoming a place where everyone belonged. Marcus thought of Rachel Winters, who alongside Dr. Williams had completed the recovery process and was preparing other airline employees to avoid repeating their own mistakes. He thought of Grace Chen, who now led with empathy and strength in the role Rachel had once abused. He thought of all the passengers who would never know how far Prestige Air had come from being just another airline that tolerated discrimination. And he thought of Tyler, who was about to start studying at Georgetown, armed with lessons on patience, accountability, and improving systems. This was the legacy Marcus wanted to build, not just profitable companies, but fair companies. Not just personal success, but systematic improvement. His phone vibrated with the last message of the day. It was from David Hartley. The FAA has issued new guidelines to prevent discrimination in aviation. These guidelines are modeled on our policies. We did it, Marcus. We really changed the industry. Marcus smiled and replied, "We did it." This was never the achievement of one person. It was everyone's determination to do better. As he lay down next to Stephanie, she murmured sleepily, "Did you have a good day?" "I had a good day," Marcus confirmed. "Tyler got into Georgetown. The FAA adopted our policies, and I think maybe we're really making a difference." "You always have," said Stephanie, already asleep. Marcus stayed awake a little longer and thought about the journey from that uncomfortable flight 5 months ago to this quiet moment of satisfaction. It had been hard. It had been expensive. It had required uncomfortable conversations and difficult changes. But every passenger who would never have to go through what his family had gone through made it worthwhile. Every employee who learned to question assumptions made it worthwhile. Every family who could fly without the fear of profiling made it worthwhile. Ultimately, ownership truly meant this, not just controlling assets, but accepting responsibility for the culture those assets created, not just demanding profit, but ensuring that profit came from treating people right. Marcus closed his eyes. He had finally found peace. He would wake up tomorrow and start anew. There would be new challenges, new problems to solve, new biases to confront. But tonight, in this moment, change seemed possible, and that possibility was everything.